So we're reading in Canto 3. The first two cantos of the poem are like a kind of introduction, and I think of it as a kind of overture to the poem. And in an overture, in a piece of music, the composer may put an overture, an opening passage in which many of the themes that will be developed in the course of the whole composition just get shown or hinted at. So in the first two cantos, we had something like that. We were introduced to Savitri, the heroine of the poem, and her situation, her mission, and finally her great achievement. And now Aurobindo is starting in this third canto to tell the story of Savitri in the same way that it's told in the legendary version in the Mahabharata. There's no introduction about Savitri. It starts straight away with the story of her father, King Ashwapati. And that is who we are reading about now. We're reading about, or we're beginning to read about his yoga, which will show us, give us an example of one aspect of yoga, the yoga of the soul's release or liberation. That is the primary aim of yoga, is liberation from the limited and illusory state of consciousness that we are in naturally. But we have this possibility to take up the psychological self-discipline of yoga, and then we can develop ourselves, our consciousness and our being beyond the limitations of our present ordinary human nature. So Aurobindo will show us this kind of liberation happening in the case of King Ashwapati, who will become the human father of Savitri. And last week we read that Savitri has been born in response to the need of the whole world, the whole material world. A world's desire compelled her mortal birth. She's born as a human being in response to the need of the whole earth. And for that to happen, this very remarkable being, Ashwapati, the lord of the horse. His name, his Sanskrit name, means horse lord. And in the Vedic symbolism, psychological symbolism, the horse is the symbol for energy, and particularly our personal life energies. We, all of us, have these life energies. Some people have stronger horses and other people not so strong. And very often our horses run away with us. We don't have full control over our horses, our life energies. But Ashwapati is shown as a person, an individual who has complete mastery over his life energies. And he uses those energies to carry him from the ordinary human state of consciousness to a higher state of consciousness. So we were reading how he is not an evolutionary being like we are. It's not that his nature is shaped by evolutionary nature. He has descended from higher planes of consciousness. He's accepted the limitations of being born as a human being in order to help the evolutionary movement forward and to help pay God's debt to earth and man, as if the divine owes us some help, since he has invited us to participate in this adventure of unconsciousness and limitation, this evolutionary adventure. He owes us some help along the way. And so he sends from time to time his messengers, his sons, to help humanity progress more quickly. So we were reading how in him, in this special being, the conversion, the changeover from the ordinary consciousness to a higher state of consciousness happened in King Asvapati. We were just reading about that. It told us that a seer was born, a shining guest of time. And for him, the conscious ends of being went rolling back. All the ordinary limitations of consciousness and power that we human beings experience, they just get dissolved, they disappear, or leaving a very extended space. And the landmarks that indicate the limitations of the little person, the small human individual, these landmarks fell away. And so in King Asvapati, the island ego, the little individually centered being, joined its continent, the much, much larger universal consciousness of which it is a part. An island can be connected to a continent. No? It may be surrounded by sea, but under the sea, the rock of the island is connected with the rock of the continent. So if the landmarks go rolling back like an ocean opening up, the island ego can join its continent and know that it's connected to a much larger consciousness and power. So I'm going to read on from there, line 126. Overpassed was this world of rigid, limiting forms. Life's barriers opened into the unknown. Abolished were conceptions, covenants, and striking off subjection's rigorous clause, annulled the soul's treaty with nature's nescience. All the grey inhibitions were torn off, and broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. Truth, unpartitioned, found immense sky room. An empyrean vision saw and knew. The bounded mind became a boundless light. The finite self mated with infinity. His march now soared into an eagle's flight, out of apprenticeship to ignorance. Wisdom upraised him to her master craft and made him an arch-mason of the soul, a builder of the immortal secret house, an aspirant to supernal timelessness. Freedom and empire called to him from on high. Above mind's twilight and life's star-led night, there gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. I think we'll start on this side. Ganga Lakshmi, you can start, please.
Overpassed was this world of rigid, limiting forms. Life's barriers open into the unknown. Abolished were conceptions, covenants, and ranking of subjections, rigorous flows. Annulled, the soul straightly with nature's nescience.
Thank you. So this world, the world that we know, this world of rigid, limiting forms, each of us is limited by our form. This world for him, with this vast opening of consciousness that he's experiencing, this world was overpassed. He went far beyond it. And the barriers, the normal limitations of life opened up into the unknown, all kinds of unknown capacities and possibilities. The covenants of conception. Covenants are agreements, almost like a kind of treaty, an agreement, an official agreement. So the way that we human beings think and conceive ideas are limited by a series of traditional agreements that this is the way the human mind works. But those agreements were abolished. They don't apply anymore. And this treaty, that's another kind of official agreement. Two countries may make a treaty, an agreement about the relationship between them. The soul has made a treaty with nature, with the unconsciousness of nature. It has accepted that for quite a long period of its development in the individual being, it will accept the rules of nature, the laws of physics and thermodynamics and all that, all the laws that govern material nature, the soul accepts. Those are not the laws that are natural to the soul. The soul is free from all those kind of material limitations. But when it accepts to incarnate here in our material world, it says, yes, for some time I will obey those laws. But when it reaches this giant point of its full development, it doesn't have to obey nature's laws anymore. So that treaty, that agreement between the soul and nature, that the soul will accept the dominance of nature, it gets annulled, wiped out. That treaty doesn't apply anymore. So all the grey inhibitions, an inhibition is something that holds you back from doing something that you would like to do, that you would aspire to do. You feel, no, it's too much for me. There's something, some grey consciousness holding us back. But those were just torn off like coverings or skins or a kind of disguise that the soul has been wearing. And the lid, the Upanishads speak about a lid which is above our mind here. It's a golden lid, it's a shining, lustrous lid, but it's hard and limiting. But that lustrous lid now, with this new realization Asvapati has achieved, that lid gets broken. He can open up to the higher levels of consciousness. It's as if there's no limit anymore. Truth, unpartitioned. Here in our world, truth is cut up into little bits. It's partitioned, and we can only ever get hold of a few little fragments of truth. We don't perceive the whole truth. But now when that lustrous lid is broken, truth, unpartitioned, found immense sky room. It's as vast as the sky. It's no longer split up into small truths. So in Asvapati's consciousness, an empyrean vision saw and knew. The empyrean is a very beautiful poetic word for the sky, the vast sky. So what has been a bounded mind is no longer bounded, no longer limited. It becomes a boundless light, full consciousness. And this small, finite self, the self that lives and identifies with the body, joined with infinity, the finite self, mated with infinity. It opens up and becomes unlimited, like infinity. Is that where we stopped? Or I went...
No, you continue.
Anyway, who's the next one to read? Alice.
Well, where do you want me to start reading?
Since I explained up to his finite self mated with infinity, you can read the next line. His march now soared.
His march now soared into an eagle's flight, out of apprenticeship to ignorance. Wisdom upraised him to her master craft and made him an arch-mason of the soul, a builder of the immortal's secret house, an aspirant to supernal timelessness.
Let's pause there. So he had been moving forward strongly, his march. But it's as if now his march gets accelerated so that he no longer has to keep his feet on the ground. He has wide wings. He can take off like an eagle, a very, very powerful bird. And there's something special about the eagle. At least traditionally, it is said that the eagle has such a wonderful power of vision that it can stare directly at the sun without being blinded. So that means a very, very high and powerful vision that can see a lot. No? So he moves powerfully upwards. It's as if he's been, like we all are, an apprentice to ignorance, or in the state of ignorance. Here, an apprentice is somebody who is learning a craft, a skill. And for a time, an apprentice has to do all kinds of very, very ordinary tasks as part of learning his craft. He's the kind of runaround boy who gets asked to do all the dirty little tasks. No? But if he's faithful and does his work well, the time will come when his master, a master craftsman that he's training with or under, will say, now it is time for you to become fully qualified. So he's been an apprentice to ignorance, but now wisdom, which is the state much higher than ignorance, lifts him up to her mastercraft. She makes him into a real master, skilled master at his craft of knowledge, no? And made him an arch-mason of the soul. So those are the steps. First, apprenticeship, and then you can become a journeyman, you're a qualified craftsman, and then you become a head mason, a master mason, an arch mason. So what he is building is the temple of the soul. He's a builder of the immortal's secret house, as if in each one of us eventually we're going to be able to build a secret house for the immortal, for our own divine being. He's an aspirant. He's aspiring to become, or to reach the state of supernal timelessness beyond all the limitations of time, an immortal being. Sarojini, would you read the last 3 lines, please?
Aspirant to supernal timelessness, freedom and empire called to him from on high, above mind's delight and life's start lent night, the glint and the dawn of a spirituality.
Yes. Freedom and empire. These are 2 of the fundamental goals of yoga. Freedom from ignorance and limitation, and empire, the capacity to rule and control oneself and one's environment or the conditions of one's life. So these possibilities of freedom, self-freedom, freedom for his soul, empire, control, called to him from on high. From high above comes an invitation that you can achieve these goals. You can become a self-ruler and a world ruler.
So empire is control?
Yes, empire means that you're in a position to rule, and to rule a vast country. An empire actually is, yeah. It's not only self-control, it's being able to control things around you. Swaraja, I mean self-rule, that is, gives freedom. And Samraja, being able to rule everything. So he experiences this invitation. It's as if above the twilight state of the mind, our mind is in a twilight state, a mixture of darkness and light, between day and night, a mixed light of dualities. And the life power is even darker. It is like as if in a kind of night of ignorance, led only by a few stars, stars which are guiding lights of truth. The life is led by stars, even though it's in a state of night. But beyond that night and the twilight, he gets a glimpse of a wonderful day, a supernal, supreme day, just beginning to dawn for him, for his consciousness. So these first 145 lines are a kind of summing up and introduction, I said last time, to the true nature of King Asvapati. But these high realizations don't come to him all at once. In the rest of the canto, we shall follow the processes by which he reaches this higher state.
Sorry, you forget one line.
Which line?
Explain. 129.
Striking off subjection's rigorous clause. It goes with the next line, which I did explain. There's a kind of an agreement between the soul and nature, by which the soul accepts to be subject, to be subjected to the rule of nature for some time. But when it has served its apprenticeship to ignorance, then that agreement gets annulled. The soul no longer has to be subject. There's a clause in that treaty, in that agreement, which says that yes, I will be subject to nature. But when the treaty is annulled, the soul doesn't have to be subject to nature. The true role of the soul is to be the ruler of nature, the leader and the guide of nature. But first it has to pass through this apprenticeship. Only when it gets upraised to the mastercraft, then that treaty gets annulled.
What is the meaning of this treaty of?
It means crossing out. In an agreement, there can be a sentence which says it's like this, it's like this. That can be crossed out. We can say it to strike out, to draw a line through it, cross it out. And that clause is a very rigorous one. As long as the treaty applies, then the soul has to obey nature. It's a very strict clause. But then the moment comes when it no longer applies at all. You'll read, Mila?
The next section.
Yes.
As soul grew into his larger self, humanity framed his movements less and less. A greater being saw a greater world. A fearless will for knowledge There to erase the lines of safety wisdom draws the barbed mind's sword, soul's dive into infinite.
Yes. So this is a process. He is growing into his larger self. And as he grows more and more, humanity, our limits, the limits of human nature, framed his movements less and less. It's still there as a framework, but it's less and less rigid. Humanity framed his movements less and less. He becomes a greater being than a human being. And that greater being sees a greater world, a greater environment, greater possibilities. One characteristic of Asvapati is his fearless will for knowledge. And in his fearless will for knowledge, for true knowledge, he has the courage to erase, to rub out the lines of safety reason draws, that for us by a bar, they block the way for mind to soar, to fly very, very high, and for the soul to dive very, very deep into the infinite. Reason protects us while we are apprentices to ignorance. And it draws lines of safety around us. Don't step over these lines. Perhaps you remember in the Ramayana, there's an incident in the Ramayana where it's in the incident of the golden deer. The demon king wants to abduct Rama's wife, Sita. And he sends one of his demons to appear there in their forest hermitage in the form of a beautiful golden deer. And that deer very, very cleverly entices Sita to follow it. She wants to catch it and keep it, and it would be a lovely pet. But she can't catch it. So she asks Rama to catch it for her. And very, very cleverly, the deer lures him away further and further. It looks as if at any moment he can catch it, but then it bounds off, leading him away. So Sita is left in the hermitage with Rama's brother, Lakshmana. And Rama told Lakshmana, "You look after Sita, I'm going to catch this deer for her, she wants it." But when it's got quite a long way away, that demon lets out a call in Rama's voice, "Oh, save me, save me." And Sita and Lakshmana hear that call. And she says to Lakshmana, "You have to go and save Rama. What's the matter with you? Why are you still here?" She curses him. She tells him all kinds of terrible things. Why he's too cowardly to go. And he says, "No, Rama's told me to stay here." But finally she's so angry with him that he thinks, oh, after all, he will have to go. So he draws a magic line around the hermitage. He tells her, whatever happens, don't cross this line. And he goes off to help Rama. And during that time while he's away, then the demon king Ravana takes the opportunity to come disguised as a Brahmin beggar, sannyasi. and begs alms and food from Sita. And in doing so, he lures her across that line. The moment she steps over it, poof, he turns into his demon form, carries her off into the sky to Lanka. So it's a very crucial moment in the story. But this idea that there's a line of safety that is drawn for our own protection, we shouldn't cross over it. So as long as we're apprentices to ignorance, reason is our protector. It draws those lines of safety that keep us from going too far beyond our natural limitations, prevents us from floating up, losing touch with the ground. We should always keep at least 1 foot or a few toes in touch with the ground. We shouldn't float off into fantasy, and we shouldn't dive too deep into mysteries that are too great for us. No? Only when we've been upraised to wisdom's mastercraft, we can step over those lines of safety. So now King Aswapati, with his fearless will for knowledge, he's dared to erase, to wipe out those lines of safety for himself. He's going to take that soar of the mind and that dive of the soul into the depths of infinity. Kamala, would you read?
Even its first steps rode up, small and large, and ventured in a blasted, clear air. In hands sustained by a transfiguring might, he caught up lightly like a light ball, left slumbering in a sealed and secret state. The powers that sleep unused in man within.
So this is also a very interesting sentence, no? So as he's growing into his larger self, even his first steps broke our small earth bounds, our narrow little limitations, no? And he could loiter, he could move freely, slow at ease in a vaster, freer air, not our narrow little earth atmosphere. And his hands, it's as if his hands are transfigured by a great divine strength, a might, so that he could pick up lightly, without any effort, this gigantic bow that's been lying there, untouched, asleep, unused, in a secret cave that's been sealed so that nobody can enter it. No? This bow represents the great powers that human beings are carrying within them, but which are hidden in a cave and they are not used. There's, of course, again in the old epic, it's in the Mahabharata, no, the story of the giant bow. Draupadi, the princess Draupadi, when she holds her Swayamvara to choose her husband, her father announces that she will marry the one who's able to pick up the bow. It's a huge, heavy bow. Nobody's been able to pick it up. It's in Ramayana? Oh, it's Rama who does it. It's okay. So Rama shows his strength by picking up that bow, and stringing it and using it. But isn't there something like that in the Mahabharata? Arjuna, in disguise, he also picks up a bow, no?
Yes.
To marry Draupadi, yes. And then it leads to all that difficulty because the 5 brothers, they have said, no, whatever any of us wins, we will share it equally between us. And then Arjuna's gone and won Draupadi's hand. So she has to marry all of them.
But this is symbolically.
Of course, yes. And here Sri Aurobindo is showing us what it is symbolical of. It's these secret powers. We are carrying all kinds of powers within us that we don't know about. They're sealed up in that secret cave. It's only when we've risen to the master craft that we can get hold of that bow and pick it up and use it. One more sentence. Would you read, please? Will you read?
He made of miracle the normal act, and turned to a common part of divine works. Magnificently natural at this height, efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts, pursued in a royalty of mighty ease, aims too sublime for nature's will. The gifts of the Spirit crowding came to him. They were his life's pattern and his privilege.
Yes, thank you. So he takes up that bow and he's able to make miracle. He can do miraculous things every day. Tremendous efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts, of beings who are still subject to death. But at the height which he has reached, they are magnificently natural. He can make them a common part, an everyday part of divine work, of divine activity. These efforts, tremendous things that we can't think of achieving. And like a royal king, easily, naturally, he pursues aims that are too sublime for nature's ordinary daily will. Our ordinary will would not be able even to conceive those aims, let alone achieve them. The gifts of the Spirit, crowding, came to him. They're coming to him naturally. No? These became the pattern of his life and his privilege. A privilege is some right, capacity that you have which is not allowed to everybody. It's something special because of your status. So then begins a long description of what are these gifts of the Spirit. We'll look at those, some of those, next time. Overpassed was this world of rigid, limiting forms. Life's barriers opened into the unknown. Abolished were conceptions, covenants, and striking off subjection's rigorous claws, annulled the soul's treaty with nature's nescience. All the grey inhibitions were torn off, and broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. Truth unpartitioned found immense sky room. An empyrean vision saw and knew. The bounded mind became a boundless light. The finite self mated with infinity. His march now soared into an eagle's flight, out of apprenticeship to ignorance. Wisdom upraised him to her mastercraft, and made him an arch-mason of the soul, a builder of the immortal's secret house, an aspirant to supernal timelessness. Freedom and empire called to him from on high, above mind's twilight and life's star-led night. There gleamed the dawn of a spiritual day. As so he grew into his larger self, humanity framed his movements less and less. A greater being saw a greater world. A fearless will for knowledge dared to erase the lines of safety reason draws, that bar mind's soar, souls dive into the infinite. Even his first steps broke our small earth bounds, and loitered in a vaster, freer air. In hands sustained by a transfiguring might, he caught up lightly, like a giant's bow left slumbering in a sealed and secret cave, the powers that sleep unused in man within. He made of miracle a normal act, and turned to a common part of divine works, magnificently natural at this height, efforts that would shatter the strength of mortal hearts. Pursued in a royalty of mighty ease, aims too sublime for nature's daily will. The gifts of the Spirit crowding came to him. They were his life's pattern and his privilege.